Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Karen, we'll have details on the latest intelligence reports around the weekend U.S. airstrikes in Iran in a moment. But we begin this morning with the race for New York City mayor. Zohran Mamdani has declared victory in the Democratic mayoral primary. Let's get the very latest with Bloomberg's Lisa Mateo in Manhattan. Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning, Nathan. Yeah, it was an incredible showing for the 33-year-old Queens lawmaker who was virtually an unknown before rising in the polls against a crowded 11-candidate field. Last night, former Governor Andrew Cuomo, who pitched himself as a seasoned moderate, conceded to his upstart rival.
Tonight was not our night. Tonight was Assemblyman Mamdani's night, and he put together a great campaign.
According to preliminary results from the City Board of Elections, in the first round of ranked choice voting, Mamdani garnered 43.5% of the vote and Cuomo 36.4%. Now, coming in third place was City Comptroller Brad Lander at 11.3%. Lander and Mamdani had cross-endorsed each other. Mamdani, who has vowed to freeze rents, seek tax hikes on corporations, the wealthiest New Yorkers, he addressed a crowd of supporters early this morning in Long Island City, Queens.
Together, we have shown the power of the politics of the future. One of partnership and of sincerity.
But the results are not official under the city's ranked choice system. A candidate is declared the winner after receiving more than 50% of the votes. The final result, well, that will not be determined until July 1st. That's when voters' backup choices are scheduled to be tabulated. And Cuomo isn't out of the race just yet, telling the New York Times that he was still considering whether to run in the November election on an independent line. Mamdani would also face Mayor Eric Adams, who was running this time as an independent, as well as Republican Curtis Sliwa and independent Jim Walden. Michael Bloomberg, the founder, majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg Radio, has endorsed Andrew Cuomo. Now, if elected, Mamdani would be New York's youngest mayor in a century, its first Muslim mayor, and the first person of South Asian descent to lead the city. Lisa Mateo, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, let's turn now, Karen, to geopolitics and the latest from the Middle East. A classified report from the Pentagon's intelligence arm is raising questions about the extent of the damage from last weekend's U.S. bunker buster bombing of Iran's nuclear enrichment facilities. We get the details from Bloomberg's Jumana Bersetchi in Dubai.
President Trump had claimed that they had totally obliterated some of those nuclear sites that they hit at over the weekend. But this latest report put out by the Pentagon itself, the Defense Intelligence Agency, suggesting that the blows didn't actually manage to administer the fatal blow that Trump had characterized. Instead, saying that at most it had set back the nuclear program by as much as 6 months. They didn't actually manage to severely cripple some of the core components of the program, especially those centrifuges that are embedded underground.
It's Bloomberg's Jumana Bersetchi reporting from Dubai. Now, this morning, President Trump is disputing that report.
I believe it was total obliteration. I believe they didn't have a chance to get anything out because we acted fast. If it would have taken 2 weeks, maybe, but it's very hard to remove that kind of material. Very hard and very dangerous for them to remove it.
President Trump spoke this morning at the NATO Leaders Summit in The Hague in comments heard live on Bloomberg Radio. Meanwhile, the truce between Iran and Israel appears to be holding. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the immediate threat from Iran's nuclear program and ballistic missiles has been eliminated, though Netanyahu's military chief is warning the campaign against Iran is not over.
Well, Nathan, the latest developments in the Middle East come as world leaders gather in The Hague for the NATO Leaders Summit. Allies are trying to agree on a new defense spending target of 5% of gross domestic product, and they're trying to project confidence after President Trump fueled doubts about his administration's continued commitment to crucial collective obligations. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte was asked if the U.S. was still committed to the alliance.
For me, there is absolute clarity that the United States is totally committed to NATO, totally committed to Article 5. And yes, there is also an expectation, which will be fulfilled today, that the Canadians and the Europeans will speed up their spending, making sure that we not only are able to defend ourselves against the Russians and others, but also to equalize. And this is fair, that we spend the same as the U.S. is spending.
And yesterday, President Trump posted a private message from Mark Rutte in which the NATO general praised Trump's actions in Iran and for making Europe pay in a big way on defense. Right now, Spain remains the only European holdout, an issue Secretary of State Marco Rubio said is a, quote, big problem, according to Politico.
Let's turn back to politics here in the U.S., Karen. There is a possible breakthrough in SALT talks. Of course, that's the state and local tax deduction when it comes to the big tax cut bill on Capitol Hill. Let's get the details now from Bloomberg's Amy Morris.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said House and Senate Republicans can cut a deal on the state and local tax deduction within the next 2 days, resolving one of the key issues that has stymied President Trump's economic legislation.
Both sides are working through, and we'll have a solution to that next 24, 48 hours.
Bessent met with Senate Republicans to urge them to unite to pass Trump's tax package by a self-imposed July 4th deadline. He thinks senators can begin voting on the bill this Friday. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Amy, thank you. From Washington to space and the latest launch of a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket.
3, 2, 1, ignition, and liftoff.
And Axiom Space sent a crew of astronauts from 4 nations to the International Space Station, marking Axiom's 4th crewed mission into low Earth orbit. It's also the first time astronauts from India, Poland, and Hungary will go to the ISS. The long-awaited launch lifted off from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida after NASA, Axiom, and SpaceX delayed the launch several times due to various issues.
All right, coming back from space, right back down to Washington, Karen. Fed Chair Jay Powell is getting ready to resume testimony on Capitol Hill later this morning. He will appear before the Senate Banking Committee. Yesterday at House Financial Services, Chairman Powell said he is still in no rush to cut interest rates while the central bank waits to see how tariffs affect the economy.
Increases in tariffs this year are likely to push up prices and weigh on economic activity. The effects on inflation could be short-lived, reflecting a one-time shift in the price level.
In remarks heard live on Bloomberg, Fed Chair Jay Powell suggested if inflation pressures remain contained, the Fed could cut rates sooner rather than later, but Powell would not point to a particular meeting.
Nathan, shares of FedEx, they're down about 6% this morning. The delivery package company forecast a worse than expected profit for the current quarter. Although it typically provides a full year forecast, FedEx said it would only share its outlook for the current quarter due to the uncertain global demand environment.
And repeating our top story this morning, former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has conceded to upstart rival Zohran Mamdani in the Democratic primary for mayor of New York City. The 33-year-old Queens lawmaker racked up commanding leads across Brooklyn, Queens, and Manhattan. Results aren't official yet. Under the city's ranked choice system, a candidate is declared the winner after receiving more than 50% of the vote. In each round, a candidate will be eliminated. Voters' number 2 choice will be distributed to the remaining candidates, and that process is repeated until a candidate receives a majority.
It's time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. And for that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. There's a bit of relief ahead today from the extreme heat gripping much of the country. Parts of the Midwest will see cooler temperatures, but it will be another brutally hot day in the Northeast. Bloomberg meteorologist Rob Carolyn has the latest.
Michael, high pressure will continue to produce hot weather today, just not the excesses of we saw yesterday. We had temperatures exceeding 100 degrees in the New York City area, in Washington, in the Boston area. In fact, Boston set their all-time record high yesterday for June at 102, 4th warmest day there in southern New England. Looks like the high is beginning to weaken, so temperatures are hot today, but not as hot as yesterday. We have heat advisories in effect from parts of southern New England through the New York City area, all the way down into the mid-Atlantic states. Good news is the Northeast will be much cooler tomorrow. Michael?
Thank you very much, Rob. Court resumes today in the sex trafficking case against music mogul Sean Diddy Combs when his attorneys have a sit-down with the judge on jury instructions. Both the defense and the prosecution rested their cases. After closing arguments, deliberations could begin as soon as Friday. The NTSB criticizing Boeing, its subcontractor Spirit Aerosystems, and the FAA for that terrifying Alaska Airlines flight when a door plug flew off in mid-flight. Miraculously, all 177 people on board survived. The NTSB preliminary report revealing Boeing employees felt pressure to work too fast, making it difficult to avoid mistakes. NTSB Chair Jennifer Hamady credits the fast-acting crew of Alaska Flight 1282.
An accident like this only happens when there are multiple system failures. And yet the crew shouldn't have had to be heroes, because this accident never should have happened.
NTSB Chair Jennifer Hamady says the finalized report will be available in several weeks. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Karen.
All right, Michael Barr, thank you. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Here's John Stashower. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. The Yankees in Cincinnati. The Reds started 22-year-old Chase Burns. A year ago, they took him with the second overall pick of the draft, and all Burns did in his major league debut was strike out the first 5 batters he faced. The Yanks did get to him in the 4th inning. Ben Rice homered. Anthony Volpe a 2-run triple. The Yanks led 3-0 in the 7th when Cincinnati loaded the bases.
Line drive down the left field line. It's a fair ball. It's going to go into the corner. 1 run scores. 2 runs score. And they're sending home Trevino. And he scores. It's a bases clearing double for Encarnacion Strand. And the game is tied at 3.
Yes, network to call. The game went to the 11th inning. Yanks scored 1 in the top. Reds came back with 2 in the bottom. Won 5-4. Yanks have now lost 9 of their last 12. They're 1-6 in extra inning games. The Mets in their last 11 games, 1-10. Half those losses to Atlanta, all in the last 8 days. Mets also had a 3-0 lead. The Braves scored 5 runs off 3 Met relievers in the 6th inning. Went on to win 7-4. Red Sox lost to the Angels 3-2. 10 innings. The Nationals lost in San Diego 4-3. Tonight in Brooklyn, it's the first round of the NBA draft. Dallas has the first pick. Will clearly take the 18-year-old Duke phenom Cooper Flagg. The Nets already had 4 first-rounders and then just made a trade to add a 5th. Part of a 3-team trade with the Celtics and Hawks. Kristaps Porzingis is headed to Atlanta. Wizards and Pelicans swung a deal. C.J. McCollum's going to Washington. Jordan Poole to New Orleans. The Knicks do not have a first-round pick or a coach. They're interviewing Minnesota assistant Mika Nori. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Karen, Nathan.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager. Primary election day is in the books in New York City, and when it comes to the mayor's race, it appears to be a generational shift.
I will be your Democratic nominee for the mayor of New York City.
33-year-old State Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani declaring victory last night in the Democratic race for mayor, beating 67-year-old former Governor Andrew Cuomo by more than 7 percentage points in the first round of ranked choice voting. Joining us this morning after Bloomberg Television managing editor Miles Miller. Miles, good morning. We had spoken just yesterday thinking we might not get a declared winner for days, but apparently this plurality of votes for Mamdani was too much for Cuomo and the rest. Good morning.
Hey, good morning to you. Yeah, I think this was the real strategy behind Mamdani linking arms with other candidates and making sure that people cross-endorsed and making sure that other people ranked him on their ballot. Say he wasn't their first choice, maybe he was their second, and this really worked. Mamdani is a 33-year-old Democratic Socialist Assembly member from Queens, and he's now on track to become the Democratic nominee for mayor. He won 43.5% of the first choice votes to Andrew Cuomo's 36.3%. And while we're still waiting for the final ranked choice results, which will be released on July 1st, Cuomo conceded last night to this primary, which tells you everything you need to know about how this is really going to end. Mamdani pulled this off with a combination of message, movement, and method. He ran on affordability, freezing rents, free buses, city-owned grocery stores, and connected with young voters, immigrant communities, and the city's growing progressive base. His campaign had 50,000 volunteers. Nathan, I'll tell you this. There was a day that I went with my wife and son and my brother-in-law and his kids to a local bar in Brooklyn, and there were people there doing outreach for Mamdani, and this was months before the primary, and that told me what I needed to know, which was that he had already created this big coalition.
Miles, you were just talking about the grassroots reach that Mamdani had in the final stretch of this. But, I mean, you got to talk about just how a few weeks ago, Mamdani was essentially an unknown in this really crowded field.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, how do you explain this surge for him?
Yeah, at one point he was polling at 1%, but the surge was helped by the support he had from top Democrats, specifically top progressive Democrats. You're talking about him being endorsed by AOC, Bernie Sanders, and then him also getting some support from Democratic establishment candidates. That cross endorsement with the Working Families Party, where Tish James stood on that stage with the person she primarily endorsed and said, rank this slate, that played a big role. But there is also a push in New York City for folks to have affordability. They did not feel that Andrew Cuomo's comeback would get them to that place. Cuomo had money, $25 million in super PAC money, but he was extremely negative in his ads. There were some ads that really stoked at fears of New Yorkers. There was a push to call Mamdani an anti-Semite when he's always said, for years and for the months of this campaign that, he is not an anti-Semite. He just is pro-Palestine, and he does want to work with Jewish New Yorkers and have a New York that makes them feel safe. But he offered something different: urgency, optimism, and a break from the old guard. And Cuomo still carried the weight of unresolved scandals: his resignation, the nursing home deaths, allegations of sexual harassment, and questions about transparency during COVID. And it's clear that voters didn't forget. They said, let's go with this new guy, even though he's only passed 3 bills in the legislature, even though he only has a staff of 5. Let's see if this is a guy who could get us forward. But of course, it's not over yet.
To that point, Miles, we had heard Cuomo during the campaign even saying that if he were to lose last night, that he would consider running as an independent. Last night, we heard him say that he's going to reassess the ranked choice voting, and he's given an interview to the New York Times that's raising some doubts as well. Where does this leave Governor Cuomo heading into November?
Yeah, so, I've been covering this story with Laura Namias, who's our senior reporter covering New York, and we talked about this a couple days ago. Is Cuomo too embarrassed to have, on July 1st, if he's truly lost a Democratic primary, is he too embarrassed to run on that independent line because he didn't get the support of Democrats? And this is a guy who's been an establishment Democrat over the last 30 years. He's on the independent line, but last night he signaled that he might not use it. He told reporters last night, tonight was not our night. Does that mean that it's not our night? Is it a firm no? We don't know. It's a big shift from the assumption that he was going to keep going no matter what. But this now tells me that this is going to be a race between Eric Adams, who is still mayor, and Zohran Mamdani. Adams, of course, skipped a Democratic primary entirely, planning to run on that stop anti-Semitism line. It gives him a second shot, and he's politically vulnerable, but can he have the groundswell of support in the Black community that Cuomo took away? Can he have the groundswell of support from Republicans who seem to like what he's done? And so this could be a two-way race. I think what will happen is that they'll find a way to push Curtis Lewa off the ballot and give Adams that Republican line, and then will those center-right Democrats, Caribbean folks, the people I grew up with, who may not know Mamdani, go for the name they know, which is Eric Adams. So that is where I think this will go.
Thanks for this, Miles. Comprehensive coverage this morning after. Bloomberg Television managing editor Miles Miller with us this morning. And in case you have just joined us, Zohran Mamdani has declared victory in the Democratic mayoral primary in New York City with more than 96% of votes counted. He has 43.5% to Andrew Cuomo's 36.4%. Eric Lander in third place with 11.3% has crossed endorsed with Mamdani. And those were the results from last night. It is 5:22 on Wall Street. Now we want to turn to the latest from the Middle East and an initial report on the damage from last weekend's bunker buster attack in Iran from the Pentagon's intelligence arm, suggesting that the U.S. airstrikes may have set Iran's nuclear program back by just a few months. President Trump, though, is disputing that.
The last thing they want to do is enrich anything right now. They want to recover. And we won't let that happen. Number one, militarily we won't.
President Trump spoke at the NATO Leaders Summit in The Hague, as heard live on Bloomberg Radio, repeating his assertion that Iran's nuclear program was totally obliterated last weekend. For more, we're joined by Bloomberg News senior editor Bill Ferries. Bill, good morning. What do we know about what this initial Pentagon assessment actually says? Good morning.
Good morning, Nathan. So, yes, there's this initial assessment out from the Pentagon's Defense Intelligence Agency, and it basically says that surprise bombing attack by those B-2s over the weekend likely did not cripple the core components of Iran's nuclear program that were buried deep underground. Now, it's clear the entrances have been completely destroyed and covered up, but their initial assessment is that deep down, those centrifuges may still be there. Iran may be able to dig through the rubble and get back down into those areas. So obviously, that would be a very disappointing outcome for the U.S. President Trump authorized this extremely risky mission with these stealth bombers flying 37 hours around the world to make this to bomb those sites. And there's still a lot more information that will probably come out, a lot more intelligence assessments that need to be done. But the president and his aides pushing back already on this this Pentagon Intelligence Agency report, saying that it's clear to them that the sites were destroyed and that Iran's nuclear program is stopped.
Yeah, to that point, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth also at the NATO summit saying that the report was preliminary and low confidence, saying that the leak of this assessment is going to be investigated. How is the effort going to get UN nuclear inspectors back in the region now that a ceasefire is in effect?
Well, that's the priority for the International Atomic Energy Agency. They have said that they think the atomic program has been set back significantly, but they wouldn't say whether that means months or years. They want to get in as soon as possible to see what is the status of that enriched uranium. Is it still at one of those sites that got bombed, or can they figure out whether it got moved in the days or weeks before the attack? The IAEA's priority is just to get boots on the ground, basically, and start seeing what they can learn about the status of that program.
Yeah, and I guess it can't really be disputed that Iran is on a back foot following all these developments. What can we expect when it comes to the possibility of further talks around the nuclear program between Iran and the U.S.?
Well, it does seem that, both Iran and Israel were ready to de-escalate at some level. They did both agree to that, at least that temporary ceasefire. It had a rough start, but it seems to be holding. That may bode well for Iran's willingness to sit down again with the U.S. in Oman, maybe through mediators, but start talking about, what they can do to scale back their nuclear program. Those are still going to be difficult negotiations, but it does seem the fact that the ceasefire is holding probably is good news for the negotiating teams.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak, your morning podcast on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed by 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 92.9 in Boston, and nationwide on Sirius XM Channel 121.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, now with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto interfaces.
And don't forget to subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. It's the latest news whenever you want it, in 5 minutes or less. Search Bloomberg News Now on your favorite podcast platform to stay informed all day long. I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.